We welcome you to channel 985,796,398.5 news with our live evening literature broadcast. Is this even a real show, or?
Yeah, just keep reading.
We now present to you our very own critical literature analysis team, our two righteous and somewhat famous reviewers, the dashing duo, our fantastic anchormen, Calvin Heintzelman and Connor Kurek. Tonight, the two will discuss and analyze J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, originally written in 1937.
Good evening. I'm Calvin Heintzelman.
And I'm Connor Kurek. However, tonight I'm afraid all is not well.
Someone managed to spill coffee on the teleprompter.
Yeah, sorry for that. I don't mind using paper scripts.
Okay, I fixed the thing. You guys are back on.
After some technical difficulties, we are back. Again.
Yes, we are. And tonight, we'll be discussing one of our favorite books, The Hobbit.
You are quite right, Calvin. Written by John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, who more commonly is referred to as J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit is one of literature's and the fantasy genre's greatest treasures.
To begin our analysis of the tale, we'd like to first introduce the book to some of our viewers who haven't actually read the book. Many spoilers ahead.
Well, it all begins in the hole in the ground, where there lived a hobbit, not a nasty, dirty, wet hole, filled to the ends with worms and an oozy smell, nor yet a dry, bare, sandy hole with nothing in it, to sit down on or to eat. It was a hobbit hole, and that means comfort.
See, this is just one thing that I love so much about Tolkien. He's already set up this balance about our protagonist. You can already infer some of Bilbo's traits, such as a balanced personality and a desire for simplicity and comfort. However, Bilbo finds himself leaving this hole for an epic adventure. Gandalf the Wizard and 13 dwarves.
Bilbo, allow me to introduce Fili, Kili, Oin, Loin, Darlin, Balin, Biffa, Boffa, Bomba, Dori, Ori, and the leader of our company, Thorin Oakenshield.
Who come knocking on Bilbo's door, manage to persuade Bilbo to be their burglar in their journey to reclaim Erebor, the dwarf's home, which was destroyed and taken over by the great dragon Smaug.
By the way, Calvin, it's pronounced Erebor. The dwarves hope to take back the stolen treasure of their ancestors, specifically the Arkan Stone. Smaug causes a great deal of conflict in the story, and is probably one of the most cunning and evil beings ever created. Take a look.
Was that an earthquake?
That, my lad, was a dragon.
As you can see, Smaug means business. And please note that that clip is from the second film, but Smaug is equally as dangerous in the novel. We'll hear more about him later.
Throughout the story, the group gets into many sticky situations. However, they manage to get out of all of them with the help of Gandalf and Bilbo. First off, they meet some unfriendly trolls. However, they manage to get away from them with the help of Gandalf. They then go into their cave and find elvish weapons. They then go to an elvish city and learn a bit about their new weapon.
And then after that, our timid hobbit and company journey through the rugged, misty mountains and encounter giant stone giants.
Yes, quite giant giants indeed.
They were rather large. Then our heroes find refuge in a nice-looking and falsely safe cave.
They then find themselves ambushed by goblins and afterward abducted, all except Gandalf. Gandalf shows up in a nick of time, kills the great goblin, and escapes the caves with the dwarves in a happy, smashing goblin fest. Bilbo, however, gets knocked out and wakes up to find himself in a riddle game with an odd creature named Gollum. Bilbo steals Gollum's magic ring, which makes the person wearing the ring invisible, and then escapes the goblins with this ring and gets back together with the rest.
Little did he know that this ring is very important. This group, however, finds themselves being chased by the goblins and wolf-like creatures named wargs. Neither Bilbo nor Gandalf could get them out of this one. However, giant eagles save them, which is perfectly normal in Middle-earth, of course. They then visit Gandalf's dangerous but helpful friend in the forest called Beorn. These new friends prove to be quite useful at the end of the story.
Yes. But after they meet Beorn, Gandalf leaves them and the rest to travel into a huge forest and almost starve to death.
Now, I think it's important to mention to our viewers that the forest that they enter is the enchanted Mirkwood Forest. A lot more than just starvation gets to Bilbo, Thorin, and his 12 dwarves. At one point, Bilbo himself fights off dozens of spiders, which only leads to their captivity by wood elves, who imprison the dwarves.
It's here that the tension between elves and dwarves is revealed.
Do not think I won't kill you, dwarf.
Tolkien writes, dwarves don't get on well with them, elves. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorin and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think, or get annoyed with them. For some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all at their beards. But Bilbo manages to escape using the power of his magic ring. He then frees the dwarves by hiding them in barrels to be shipped down a river into a town of humans called Lake Town.
From Lake Town, the dwarves and Bilbo travel through the final stretch to the Lonely Mountain, where their treasure, and of course a dragon, lies, and revenge awaits them. It's here that Bilbo comes face to face with this evil being and attempts to flatter him with compliments and wordplay. However, they eventually anger the dragon, Smaug, who discovers that they had been at Lake Town. It's here that Smaug's true wrath and evil is revealed. His pure hatred for other living beings comes out with his destructive nature. Smaug then flies away, almost ensuring Lake Town's demise, and nearly destroys the town, but is killed by Bard, a human bowman.
So, allies?
Allies. Allies and mediator, not mediator.
The people...
Allies or allies? Allies.
The people of Lake Town now think that the treasure of the dragon is theirs, and go to the mountain to attempt to claim it with the help of the Wood Elves, for they are allies. The dwarves, specifically Thorin, refuse, and Bilbo and the 13 dwarfs all lock themselves up in the mountain and prepare for a siege. Then Bilbo, being the rational hobbit and mediator he is, secretly hands over the Arkenstone to try to negotiate and create peace. Ironically, war almost breaks out between them.
However, Gandalf comes back and informs all of them that the goblins and the wargs were planning to attack them.
Gandalf gets the attention of the armies and thunderously yells, "Dread has come upon you all. Alas, it has come more swiftly than I guessed. The goblins are upon you."
Dwarves, humans, and elves come together to fight a common enemy and manage to defeat the goblins and the wargs. However, they receive much needed help from the Eagles and Bjorn from earlier in the story. The battle becomes known as the Battle of Five Armies, and it wasn't won without loss. It's revealed that Thorin and his nephews, Fili and Kili, all perished in this massive battle. But Thorin doesn't leave the novel without parting words to a hobbit whom he had too many differences with. Thorin says, "There is more good in you than you know, child of the kindly West, some courage and some wisdom, blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell."
Then the story ends with Bilbo returning to his home, his fellow hobbits thinking he was dead, and auctioning off everything in his old home. This is one example of Tolkien's sense of humor. Also, everyone seems to think that the adventure had really changed Bilbo, and so should the reader.
Indeed, my fellow good anchor. In fact, at the end of their adventure, Gandalf says to Bilbo, "Something is the matter with you. You are not the hobbit that you were."
Yes, indeed. For as The Hobbit opens, Bilbo Baggins is a smug, wealthy, timid, Borgias recluse enjoying a secure and comfortable life. His wealth and security manifest a kind of greed. One might even say he hoards his wealth like a dragon on a pile of gold.
But just as Gandalf pointed out, there is a major development within Bilbo throughout the whole story. In fact, right off the bat, Gandalf noticed the potential within Bilbo. He says, "Let's have no more argument. I have chosen Mr. Baggins, and that ought to be enough for all of you. If I say he's a burglar he is. Or he will be when the time comes. There is a lot more in him than you guess, and a great deal more than he has any idea of himself." When Bilbo decides to go on the adventure with Gandalf and the dwarves, he opens himself up to a world outside of his comfortable hobbit, and becomes aware enough to be able to relieve himself from his desire for comfort. One scholar realizes this about Bilbo, and states that slaying his greed is the condition for his being capable of opening himself to tradition. By realizing his contingency, he becomes capable of transcending Hobbiton's parochialism.
Hobbiton's parochialism.
Oh yeah, of course, that's better.
Yes, you see, Bilbo was, as one might say, adapted to the continuous and calm culture in his hometown of Hobbiton. By leaving, even temporarily, to go on his adventure, Bilbo becomes capable to change his mindset on life because he's introduced to other cultures.
What's interesting about Bilbo, though, is that throughout the novel, Bilbo develops into his full potential as a character, but he never really changes. While Bilbo gets into a lot in his adventure, and even has a showdown with Smaug himself, he still constantly longs for his simple old life and his home. Tolkien writes, he, Bilbo, was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favorite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing, and not for the last time.
Another important aspect of Bilbo is that he maintains his true inner character regardless of the situation. Even when the dwarves become corrupted by greed in the Lonely Mountain, he uses his common sense to try to end the whole ordeal.
Now, the most important thing to note about Bilbo is simply the irony of a hobbit being a hero that has become so lovable in literature.
Richard Roos writes, how does an author create a characterization of a hobbit, a little person smaller than a dwarf, and having no beard and wearing no shoes because of his furry feet? Hobbits must have a style all their own. He's so lovable simply because Bilbo is so unique to the hero world.
Because Bilbo is so small, he faces his greatest enemies in the novel with words and wit, rather than just his sword. Cathy Cupitt writes, in The Hobbit, words become mightier than actions, as Bilbo's most significant confrontations with foes like Gollum and Smaug take the form of trial by riddles. This riddling in place of battles has the potential to be a fundamental subversion of the heroic epic, and is, by its nature, comic. Comic subversion is just another major technique that Tolkien used in The Hobbit, with Bilbo as its main tool. Specifically, it's the idea that Bilbo avoids battle with riddles that makes the story rather comical. At the end of the story, Bilbo rides out the entire battle of 5 armies with the concealing power of his magic ring. I mean, he doesn't fight at all in the biggest battle of the story. But in the end, Bilbo is happy to be small. You are a very fine person, Mr. Baggins, and I am very fond of you. But you are only quite a little fellow in a wide world after all. Thank goodness, said Bilbo laughing, and handed him the tobacco jar. Tolkien has successfully created one of the most unique and ironic heroes in fantasy literature, Bilbo Baggins. After all, though, it's up to the reader to decide whether or not he or she likes and can relate to this hobbit.
Well, aside from just Bilbo, there are quite a few other things that should be noted about The Hobbit. Did all of you know that this book was simply intended for a younger audience? What's so interesting about this is that today, people of all ages dive into the world of Tolkien. Perhaps it's due to the novel's simple themes that hit home in the center of the human heart. As Roos writes, the successful novelist combines plot, setting, character, dialogue, and theme in such a way that they complement one another to create a unity that commands the interest of the reader by engaging him in an experience of universal values. J.R.R. Tolkien is a successful novelist.
Well, yeah, with a fantasy novel with such an engaging story, it's no wonder people of all ages have loved this book. But now, as you know, it's time that we dive deeper into The Hobbit to examine the symbolic meaning behind the story.
I'm going to go ahead and stop you right there, Connor. I actually heard that Tolkien disliked symbolism and allegory, and that he didn't use it in his works.
Well, we don't know if that's 100% true. Where'd you hear that?
Well, I just so happened to videotape Tolkien when he said it last week. Carl, roll the tape.
I cordially dislike allegory in all of its manifestations, and always have done so since I grew old and wary enough to detect its presence. I much prefer history, true or feigned, with its varied applicability to the thought and experience of readers. I think that many confuse applicability with allegory, but the one resides in the freedom of the reader, and the other in the purposed domination of the author.
That doesn't even make sense. Tolkien died in 1973. That's not possible. We don't know who that is. He didn't even say his name.
And that is my John Tolkien's opinion on allegory.
Oh.
Good job, Carl. Now, it's fair to say that this story is the story of Bilbo Baggins and nothing more. It's just a story. Using Tolkien's statement, it can be said that Bilbo, Thorin, Gandalf, Gollum, Smaug, and Bard are not representations of some bigger idea. They are all simply unique characters in a unique world. They represent just themselves in this classic adventure. Roos states, all this diversity among characters is supported by the diction and tone of their speech. From the most exalted to the lowliest, none speaks out of character.
Now, Tolkien has a style of storytelling that is unparalleled by other authors. Not only does the story's narrator directly address the reader on multiple occasions, he also adds a lighthearted element by making even terrible situations comedic. One such situation in the novel is when Bilbo helps Thorin and his 12 dwarves escape from the elves' prison by escape via barrels. Bilbo loads up all of the dwarves into each barrel and doesn't give himself enough time to escape along with them. It was just at that moment that Bilbo suddenly discovered the weak point in his plan. Most likely, you saw it some time ago and have been laughing at him. But I don't suppose you would have done half as well yourself in his place. While normally a situation like this would put off an urgent and dire mood in a story, the narrator successfully makes the situation lighthearted and quite funny.
Overall, this style of writing has a huge impact on the mood of the novel. How is the reader supposed to take anything seriously when the narrator playfully jokes around about the situation? Well, now we have decided to go a bit more in-depth on one of our articles analyzing The Hobbit with our new segment called Awfully Awesome Article Analysis.
Let's go to our dashingly handsome and dangerously blonde and somewhat unprofessional home reporter, Rick Heintzelman. Good evening, America. Wait, or is it world? Hey Jeff, is this live worldwide or just in America?
You think I know?
Tonight, as you know, our main textual focus is The Hobbit. Just hold on a second, sorry. Hey Dad, you turned on the TV, I'm trying to record a live newscast here.
Shut up, Connor!
My name's Rick, you don't even know my own name, Dad.
Quit playing with your friends. Oh wait, you don't have any. Now go to bed.
Stop. Hello, as you know, I'm Rick Heintzelman, and tonight the scholarly article that we will be discussing is called Translation and Criticism, the Stylistic Mirror by scholar Alan Turner. This couch is comfy. To begin, Turner compares the meaning of the nouns translation and criticism because, as he states, the relationship between translation and criticism is far from clear. Translation is a method that authors will use to rewrite older text to make it more available and understandable for new generations of readers. To sum this up, newer generations don't understand older language, so a translation makes this language newer. Turner even goes on to answer just how translators work to accomplish this. The work of a translator may be compared to that of the musical arranger who rewrites a piece for a different instrument or group of instruments. But how does this all apply to The Hobbit? Well, this article points out that Tolkien performs a strong use of literary archaism. Literary archaism employs words no longer current in everyday registers of the language, such as the names of obsolete artifacts or unusual syntactic structures known from the English of Shakespeare and his contemporaries or the King James Bible. It's at this point that Turner proves that he really knows what he's talking about. I myself had to look up many of these new literary terms. Now, it must be noted that The Hobbit was actually rewritten to more accurately merge with the story of the series that sprung out of this prequel, The Lord of the Rings. And Turner notices that all of the poetry and songs within Tolkien's classic remain the same. Turner says that the effect here is of a timeless inherent within the diction rather than a patina of age applied to the surface. What this means is that Tolkien succeeds in not using words or phrases that would tie this novel to any specific time, period, and this is especially visible in his poetry, which will have the same meaning 200 years from now. Now, one place that Tolkien fails in creating this timelessness is where he removes the word tomato from the second edition of The Hobbit and replaces it with pickle. While this might seem like a very minor change, the reason behind this must be examined. You see, it was removed from the novel because the word isn't introduced into Europe until a specific time much later than the events of the adventure, which is supposed to take place in the remote past. So, in Alan Turner's article, he proves that Tolkien is indeed incredibly committed to his writing and successfully created a timeless tale. Now, one last thing has to be mentioned. Turner points out that a major anachronism, or something that doesn't belong in its time period, within his novel is hobbits in general. And as you know, Bilbo Baggins, the main character in The Hobbit, is a hobbit. So Bilbo Baggins, the protagonist of this story, is an anachronism himself. Bilbo lives in an age of mighty heroes that are much stronger than him, who fight their enemies with constant courage and bravery. This outlier in Tolkien's work throws a slightly distorted mirror image against which Tolkien's use of language may be defined, as Turner put it. So, Tolkien has indeed done something very interesting in this novel, knowing this fact. So that's all for your scholarly analysis tonight. Again, I'm Rick Heintzelman. Back to you, Calvin and Connor. Do you have any sixes?
Go fish.
Hey, we're back live!
Hello there, audience. Thank you, Rick. That kid's an odd fellow, isn't he?
With looks like Rick's, I couldn't take my eyes off him. He kind of looked like me.
I don't see it. But to stop Connor from daydreaming, let's now go to some of our viewers for any questions they'd like to be answered in our newscast.
And tonight, just give me a second here. Our first question comes from Seymour Butts. Good job, Carl. Woo! That's okay, I'll just edit out your shenanigans.
Yeah, it's a shame this thing is live. You can't edit.
Our first question for tonight comes from Holden McGroin. Our first question for tonight comes from Barack Obama.
Never heard of him. Looks like a nice fellow.
Well, he asked, what Christian themes are present in The Hobbit?
Great question, Mr. Obama. It must first be noted that J.R.R. Tolkien was a devout Catholic. In fact, Tolkien himself was a major factor behind why his friend C.S. Lewis converted to become a Christian.
The first simple Christian ideal in The Hobbit is the act of going outside of one's comfort zone for a greater purpose. In the Bible, Christians are commanded to take up their cross and follow Jesus. In fact, we are supposed to... Carl, stop messing around! Put it back! Carl!
I'm sorry.
In the Bible, Christians are commanded to take up their cross and follow Jesus. In fact, we are supposed to leave everything behind when we do so. As Livingston points out, Tolkien has taught us that staying put is nice, but making a difference in the world is worth the journey.
And Bilbo does just this when he leaves his comfort zone to fulfill a purpose he has not yet realized.
Okay, it's back.
And Bilbo does just this when he leaves his comfort zone to fulfill a purpose that he has not yet realized. As Bilbo runs out the door to catch up with Thorin and his 12 dwarves at the beginning of the novel, Tolkien writes, "To the end of his days, Bilbo could never remember how he found himself outside, without a hat, a walking stick or any money, or anything that he usually took when he went out. Leaving his second breakfast half finished and quite unwashed up, pushing his keys into Gandalf's hands, and running as fast as his furry feet could carry him down past the lane, past the great mill, across the water, and there on for a mile or more."
Bilbo barely thinks about what he's doing. He doesn't even prepare for an adventure. But something grabs a hold of the Hobbit.
Carl, I swear to God.
I'm sorry.
But something grabs a hold of the Hobbit, and he's soon in it, all or nothing. Just like the apostles who decided to follow Jesus on a last-minute notice, they didn't know what they were getting into, but they went along anyways.
Another Christian's theme in the novel is the battle against evil.
All of the evil characters in this novel are simply evil, and that's it. Nothing more.
And all the good characters are simply good, with flaws here and there.
In the Battle of Five Armies, readers witness all kinds humans, dwarves, and elves coming together to fight the true. I'm gonna kill you.
Why are you grunting so much?
Okay, take 3.
In the Battle of Five Armies, readers witness all kinds humans, dwarves, and elves coming together to fight the true evils of Middle-earth, the goblins.
Christians believe that there is only one true evil in the world, and that is Satan himself.
The battle is quite possibly Tolkien's way of saying that we on Earth need to be able to put aside minor differences to do whatever we can to end that one true evil that we face, which is Satan.
And finally, I believe it is rather fair to say that Gandalf can be considered a Jesus-type figure in the novel. In fact, it is Gandalf who gets Thorin and company out of situations when all else fails. We know that Tolkien didn't like allegory, so it's not accurate to say that Gandalf is the manifestation of Jesus in Middle-earth.
But one thing that is correct is the fact that while other characters have some flaw, Bilbo with his temptation for the ring, Thorin with his greed and hate-driven quest, and the elves and their irrational actions, Gandalf doesn't seem to have a single flaw. Or at least he doesn't reveal it. And after all, it was Gandalf's idea to elect Bilbo as the group's burglar. He saw the potential within Bilbo that no one else, even the reader, could see at first. Good question, Barack Obama.
Alright, our next question is from Ryan Morey. who attends Verse Laboratory School.
Oh yes, we have a picture of him right here.
Carl, show it.
Okay, hold on. Action.
Dashing young fellow with that face, I do say.
Well, let's get on to the actual question that this viewer asked us. How's the weather today?
I got him. That's okay. Okay, go back.
So Mr. Maury's question is, how's the weather today? It's sunny with a chance of this news broadcast, but you can go.
Unfortunately, we are just about out of time. But it must be said that there is simply so much more to examine and analyze within The Hobbit that it would be almost impossible to cover everything.
So it's up to you. If you'd like to become immersed in a book in which each page of this tale is filled with high adventure and a part of Middle-earth, a world that Tolkien has filled to the brim with so much detail, then pick up a copy of the book for yourself.
Nancy Livingston couldn't have said it better. Tolkien had... Nancy Livingston couldn't have said it better. Tolkien has enchanted young people with his prelude to Lord of the Rings, labeled the greatest fantasy epic of our time. So take that chance and see if Tolkien's The Hobbit will enchant you as well. Now, we have one more clip to show our audience. Carl?
Yep, I got it.
I cannot guarantee his safety. Understood. Nor will I be responsible for his fate.
You'll have a tale or two to tell when you come back.
Can you promise that I will come back?
No. And if you do, you will not be the same.
Once again, while the movies are amazing, the true power is found within the text. Reading Tolkien's writing is how one truly gets the experience of being alongside Bilbo Baggins himself, Thorin and company of 12 Dwarves, and Gandalf, the Great Wizard.
So again, viewers, it's up to you to discover the true uniqueness of Tolkien's writing. Just like Bilbo took that chance and ran outside of his hobbit hole, take that chance and give The Hobbit a shot.
And just like Bilbo, you probably won't regret it.
So thank you for tuning in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Calvin Heintzelman.
And I'm Connor Kurek. We hope to see you
Carl.
next week.
So thank you for tuning in tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Calvin Heintzelman.
And I'm Connor Kurek. We hope to see you next week for our next literature analysis.
So good night, everybody.
Woo! That was easy.
You want to go get some pizza?
Sure.
Yo, Carl, we're getting pizza.
Oh yeah, hit me up.